Well, thanks again for joining me on my daily dose. Today is May the 20th, 2013. As far as my condition or health update today, not a whole lot has changed again, other than today at about 2 p.m. or so, something like that, they came in and checked my blood pressure and it had bottomed out and gotten really low. My heart rate was up, and so they decided finally that maybe I'd gotten dehydrated a little bit again. So they put some fluids to me through the IV, and I recovered from that fairly quickly. I got a nap during that time, and so that was great. I had several visitors come by today and spend time with me, especially my wife, but also some friends from the Weaver Church of Christ were by. It's always a joy to see anyone who comes by, especially those of like precious faith. When you consider spiritual things, we always realize that as we go through life, we do meet with difficulties, and that's really what this program is all about. But I'm going to discuss with you a passage that I referred to the other day as far as it came in a card that I received. It comes from Psalm 62 and verse 2, and if you would just read with me and we'll see what the Bible has to say there. Here the psalmist writes and says, "From the end of the earth will I cry unto thee. When my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to the rock that is higher than I." Friends, I key on several words sometimes as I read through the scriptures and focus on them. The first word I want to key on here in this verse is the word overwhelmed. We all understand what it means to be in that position. We all understand what it means to be overwhelmed, to have the pressures of the world. It seems almost everything around us is caving in, and we get to a point where we're not sure which way to turn or to whom to turn, and we begin to look for answers. But when we think about that in life, we have to understand that during those most overwhelming times, God is going to be there for us. As a matter of fact, to go back and review this word overwhelmed, if you look at it from the Hebrew language, you would discover the word literally means to have a burlap or some sort of cloth such as that placed on you and sand put on top. And I think that's a perfect description of how we feel when we're overwhelmed. You think about people who say, well, I'm just buried under these burdens. I'm buried under this stress. And that's what the word means here. But the psalmist directs our mind and says, when we are overwhelmed, we want to go or look into the rock. Now, when we think about that, we understand, perhaps you already do, that when we speak of the rock, we're speaking of the Lord. We don't have to be in the dark about that, however. The psalmist gives us yet another passage found much earlier in the writings. But in Psalm 18 and verse 2, he writes and says this, "The Lord is my rock, my fortress, my deliverer, my God, my strength. In whom will I trust? My buckler and the horn of my salvation, my high tower." And so what we're seeing here then in essence is this, that when the Lord himself comes to us, when the Lord himself is in our presence, it does not matter if we are overwhelmed, buried under burdens, we can move unto the rock. Now again, there are no other rocks. We may think of our friends, our family, and those to whom we are acquainted. We may say, well, they're a rock. They're a source of strength for me. And in essence, they can be in a sense. But ultimately, the only rock, the only sure thing, the only thing upon the high place that we have is the Lord. And I realize in my times here, at least my struggles, I can't speak for yours, but I know in many ways we're all the same, that we do feel overwhelmed. My family, my wife in particular at this time, I realize she feels overwhelmed where she is, and it just hurts me to my core to think about the things that she's having to deal with, to think about the stresses, to think about the things that she's having to do around the house that just some time ago, a few weeks ago, I was home and able to help and do. But at the same time, I'm encouraged by her strength. Because her strength, although it may seem low, it may seem weak at times, I see her turning to the Lord. I see her looking toward the rock. And I pray that as we go through our daily lives, that when we feel overwhelmed, when we're buried underneath the burdens of life, that we'll always look to the high place. We'll always look to the rock. That is the rock of our salvation, the Lord himself. I pray that you'll do that, and I hope that you've been encouraged.